Paul Jepson often talks about rewilding in terms of what he calls cultural framing. To many British people, carnivores such as lynx are seen as a threat to the farmer, therefore a threat to tradition and British rural culture. The cultural framing is different in southern Spain, at least when it comes to the lynx, and at least for the moment. This is a procession I stumbled on, where children and families are all processing behind the statue of a saint. Southern Spain is rich in rural traditions like this, but the lynx doesn't stand in opposition to this tradition. Because it's seen as a distinctly southern Spanish animal, it's a part of that tradition.
You're listening to the Rewilding Earth podcast. I'm your host, Jack Humphrey. Welcome to the third and final episode of our special series on Europe's great carnivore comeback. In this installment, Julius Purcell travels to Spain's wild Sierra Morena to witness the remarkable return of the Iberian Lynx, once the world's most endangered cat. He'll uncover how a dedicated coalition of scientists, conservationists, and local communities brought the lynx back from the brink and explore the challenges that still threaten its future. Along with the triumphs, Julius examines the tensions between rewilding and rural life, the shifting political landscape across Europe, and what the fate of the lynx means for the continent's broader efforts to restore nature. We close this series with a story of hope, complexity, and recovering wildness at the heart of Europe.
These are the calls of an Iberian lynx, captured on a webcam high up in the oaks and pines of Spain's remote Sierra Morena. Cousin to the Eurasian lynx, American bobcat and Canadian lynx, the Iberian lynx is present only in Spain and Portugal, and it is the most endangered feline on Earth. Although it's quite small, the Iberian lynx exudes big cat charisma. Strong front legs, tufted ears and a mane-like ruff complete its air of disdainful majesty. Its near extinction and dramatic recent recovery spark intense emotion in Spain.
Desde chica no había lince ya en Extremadura.
When I was a child, there were no lynxes left in Extremadura. They were a ghost on the landscape.
Biologist María Jesús Palacios oversees the Iberian lynx restoration project for Spain's regional government of Extremadura.
By 2002, in the whole of Spain, there were only 94 Iberian lynx left. So every time we release a lynx into the wild now, I feel I'm going to cry with emotion.
Thanks to the 25-year project undertaken by Spain and Portugal, the Iberian lynx has been brought back at least a little way from the abyss. Today, more than 2,000 of these magnificent big cats prowl the southern Iberian Peninsula. And there's been some more good news too. The speaker you're hearing, a colleague of María Jesús, is briefing Spanish officials on the 2024 decision by the IUCN to reclassify Iberian lynx from endangered to a less drastic vulnerable. The plan's worked, he's saying, because politicians, landowners, mayors, farmers, hunters, many ordinary people came together out of love for the lynx. As Spaniards and Portuguese, he's saying, we can be proud of being a part of one of the most successful conservation projects in the world. But amid the joy is apprehension, because as we've seen in the 2 previous episodes on bears and wolves, the reintroduction of carnivores across Europe over the last 20 years is now facing a backlash. Political populism has rewilding in its sights.
Would be turned over to rewilding, just left to go wild.
Far-right hostility to nature restoration is cutting through to voters. Centrist politicians are panicking and giving way to this hostility, even though it's often based on misinformation.
You just couldn't make it up, could you?
Thank you, Nigel Farage is coming to Australia.
Ecologists like Maria Jesus fear that huge progress in European rewilding is now on the line. And even the success story of the Iberian lynx doesn't have a guaranteed happy ending.
Venga, hasta luego. Adiós.
It's a chilly February dawn in Morena, a small town in rural Extremadura.
Muchos gorriones, ¿no?
Sí.
Environmentalist Samuel Pla works with the Spanish organisation CBD Habitat. He's taking us out into the countryside. After a long period of drought, a blessedly rainy winter has turned the landscape here a lustrous green. Among the little encima oak trees that dot the landscape, we can see a shepherd with a small flock. This is olive country. The olive harvest is just ending, and Samuel recites the different varieties of olives grown here. But this is also now, miraculously, lynx country, and Samuel is taking us to the heart of that miracle. He started working on the lynx conservation project at the beginning of the 2000s. This is when the first reliable census of the lynx in Spain came out, revealing that there were only 94 Iberian lynx left in Spain and Portugal, so therefore in the whole world. The populations were confined to 2 tiny pinpricks on the map: the Doñana wetlands on the Portuguese border, and north of Seville, the Sierra Morena. So the Spanish government decided to act. Supported by the European Union's Life Environmental Programme, it set up a series of centres for breeding in captivity. Fortunately, the 2 lynx populations were genetically distinct, so lynx from Doñana were bred with lynx from the Sierra Morena and then released into the landscape. By 2006, the population had stabilised. Genetic diversity had improved, but one factor was key for the lynx's ongoing viability. The Iberian lynx is a specialist species, heavily relying on one food source.
Rabbits.
This land once teemed with rabbits. The name Spain may come from the Phoenician Semitic word meaning rabbit, so Iberian lynx and rabbits co-evolved. Samuel explains that CBD Habitat's work on the lynx project is only 15 to 20% taken up with the big cat itself. The rest of the work is all focused on the rabbits that the lynx eats. Unhappily for the Iberian lynx, already faced with habitat loss and other pressures, waves of myxomatosis tore through the rabbit populations here in the 20th century. A lynx needs, at the very least, 2 rabbits per hectare. High concentrations of rabbits per hectare can be found in Spain, but often only in, say, 1,000 hectares. This might sound like quite a lot of land, but if you consider that a reproducing female lynx needs 600 hectares in her range, this is not going to be enough rabbit-populated land to support a viable lynx population. So, CBD Habitat has worked to transform large areas of the landscape and build back the rabbit population. Warrens were created, pools to drink from, grassland was restored where there had been none before and removed from where there was too much. We created, Samuel says, a mosaic landscape for rabbits. And where the rabbit goes, Samuel is saying, the Iberian lynx goes too. Its presence drives rabbits on through the landscape, and the rabbit carrion that the lynx leaves benefits everything else. Spanish imperial eagles, for example, currently listed as vulnerable. Where the lynx thrives, so does the whole ecosystem. place that Samuel's brought us to is breathtaking. Surrounded by poplars, a small lake glitters in the chilly winter sunshine. A few sheep are grazing. Behind them rise the Hornachuelos mountain range. The air rings with birdsong, woodpeckers, and black-bellied sand grouse. Here in 2014, the Lynx Life project moved up a gear. A decade ago, this was where the first Iberian lynx were released beyond the 2 original nuclei. Here, and in other places, the lynx population would grow to its current strength of over 2,000 individuals. Grow, spread, and thrive. That's the hope. And the landscape, Samuel explains, is perfect. Iberian lynx love shrub, neither too open nor too wooded. And stretching away before us is a carpet of gorse, small grassy clearings interspersed with holm oaks. And when you look closer, you can see rabbits. Now, in February, the female lynx have been on heat for many weeks. Samuel saw a female here a week ago, already with a prominent belly. She'll give birth around the beginning of March. Listen for the magpies, he's saying. When they set up a chatter like they just did, there's lynx about. And sure enough, a few moments later, when we reach the observation post on the hillside above, a birdwatcher reports that she had just seen a lynx. A female, she's saying. We watch for a couple of hours, scanning the scrub with binoculars. We're not so lucky. No lynx for us today. But we do see what in Spanish is called a criallo, although it turns out I've been mispronouncing it. Samuel has stood up here many times and seen lynx swim across the lake below. There are times, he's saying, when you see a very young lynx with a massive rabbit in its mouth, and you say to yourself, my goodness, how can he do that? It's such a beautiful animal, so beautiful. Yeah, I've been working with lynxes for over 20 years, and every time I see one, it still makes my heart race.
Now on BBC Scotland with more from the day's top stories.
1,500 miles to the north of the olive groves of Extremadura, a very different debate about lynx is taking place.
A pair of wild lynx were captured on wildlife camera. Now, this
early in 2025, there was a wave of clandestine lynx releases in the Scottish county of Aberdeenshire.
Police are investigating reports of another 2 lynx on the loose in the Highlands.
Now, lynx releases are illegal in Scotland, and the rogue animals were quickly recaptured. Eurasian lynx, slightly bigger than Iberian lynx, were native to Scotland until their eradication centuries ago. Scottish rewilders and much of the public want them reintroduced, but many farmers and landowners are bitterly opposed to this. It's pretty clear which side the Scottish First Minister is on.
The Scottish Government does not support the reintroduction of the lynx, and it's an illegal act to release a lynx.
In Scotland and Britain in general, restoration of lynx is yet another front in a culture war about nature restoration.
The farming community, they see the nature conservationists as being urban. The nature conservationists see them as the problem.
I'm on a Zoom call to the veteran British ecologist Paul Jepson. For Jepson, many promoters of British rewilding have just gone in too hard against farmers and landowners. It's created, he says, a toxic legacy. Rewilding has become entangled with the polarised debate around Britain's exit from the European Union in 2016.
And I think Brexit was just a symptom of national discontent. And then rewilding comes in just in a horribly controversial way. It didn't seep up through considered discourse.
So an already polarised atmosphere was then inflamed by the botched attempts at lynx bombing in January.
Someone throwing 4 lynx out of a car or whatever.
And as Paul explains, although public support for lynx reintroduction in Britain is rising, Britain is culturally just not as used to wildness as other parts of Europe.
That's the big difference between continental Europe and the UK. Rewilding just came in as a controversial thing. It exposes quite a lot about British risk averseness and the lack of political vision and lack of comfort of living with wild animals. It's so long culturally since we've only had any wild animals around which could do any harm to anything. I think much longer than in Spain or places.
I've lived in Spain for many years and recognise the sense of what Paul's saying. Rewilding is not a very well-known term in Spain, but it doesn't seem to play much of a role in culture wars here either. Heading back into the town of Morena, we pass agricultural stores and tractor workshops. The old town is studded with magnificent churches from Spain's 17th century golden age. In the central square, dazzlingly whitewashed, the cafes are full for lunchtime. It seems happy enough. But under the surface of rural Spanish towns like these, there's often a layer of malaise. While agriculture is being rocked by climate change, mass immigration is transforming rural as well as urban communities, and mainstream politics is under attack. In the square, I meet Tomás Angulo, a former bullfighter who now works for the rural police. Then it's back out through the countryside again, this time in a patrol jeep through plains of cereals broken up with olive groves. No lynx this time. Tomás is taking me to a crime scene. Yesterday, he explains, a gang of immigrants stole a truckload of olives from a nearby farmer. Tomás warmly greets the farmers, Luisa and Alberto. They point out tire tracks in the grass and Tomás takes photos. The long drought ended last fall, Luisa's saying, and a rainy winter has led to a bonanza olive harvest. But this valuable crop only makes them vulnerable to the crime gangs. Tomás, our police guide, has no doubt who's ultimately to blame. Politicians in Madrid and Brussels. They know nothing about rural life, he's saying. They screw over hard-working farmers with rules and red tape. It's hard enough with the drought they've had. His outburst contains all the elements of European rural discontent. Drought and the ravages of climate change, immigrants who many suppose don't respect law and custom, while distant urban elites such as the European Union sneer at struggling farmers. A European-style Trumpism may well be finding a foothold in places like these. If so, it could gravely impact the fate of rewilding across Europe. The huge strides in securing cores, corridors and carnivores in Europe in the last 20 to 30 years were partly made possible by that political elite. Conservationists criticise the European Union's agricultural policies for contributing to the huge decline in bugs, birds and wildflowers, intensifying the biodiversity crisis. But it's also true that the European Union has poured money into the dramatic restoration of wolves, bears and lynx. The European Union funded 60% of the Iberian Lynx programme. So the turbulent politics engulfing Europe now could impact heavily on nature restoration. And yet my experiences in the southern Spanish countryside, the north is a different matter, do reflect the broad social support on which the Lynx project was so successfully built. Some Spanish farmers and mayors, even in the south, are hostile to lynx, but nowhere near the same level of hostility as that shown to carnivores in Britain. I don't think the olive farmer Alberto's views are all that unusual. Farming and ecology just have to learn to live together, he says. He's telling me how one day he was working here, and a friend said, "Look, a lynx." He describes how it passed slowly in front of them, between the trees. I always stay for a while in the olive grove here, taking a walk, contemplating. And you start to see the animals. You listen to them, and it's really nice. I really like that. I like that there are wild animals out there. It's normal. And what does Tomás, the passionate defender of farmers, think? Although the Iberian lynx is smaller than the Eurasian lynx, the Iberian lynx is a nuisance to farmers. Tomás confirms this. Lynx do sometimes kill lambs, he's saying. But lynx have great respect. And people have been well informed about the value of the lynx in the landscape, despite the occasional damage that they do. Tomás describes a recent sighting. The lynx passed by calmly. It was like the king of the jungle. It walked by matter-of-factly as if it was just saying hello to us. It's a lovely animal. It's such a shame that it disappeared for so long, but now it's back and recovered, and that's great news. And great news for the ecosystem too. Paul Jepson often talks about rewilding in terms of what he calls cultural framing. To many British people, carnivores such as lynx are seen as a threat to the farmer, therefore a threat to tradition and British rural culture. The cultural framing is different in southern Spain, at least when it comes to the lynx, and at least for the moment. This is a procession I stumbled on, where children and families are all processing behind the statue of a saint. Southern Spain is rich in rural traditions like this, but the lynx doesn't stand in opposition to this tradition. Because it's seen as a distinctly southern Spanish animal, it's a part of that tradition. It's been featured on Spanish postal stamps. It crops up in Spanish art and literature. One of the most famous works of the Spanish artist Francisco Goya is an etching entitled "The Sleep of Reason Produces Monsters." It depicts a slumped, unconscious man. The monsters of the title rise from the back of the man's head as he sleeps. The etching expresses Goya's hope that Spain will reject these monsters of superstition and embrace the values of the Enlightenment instead. Watching over this sleeping man is the embodiment of those values, an Iberian lynx. With its fiercely intelligent face and wide-awake expression, it represents reason. It represents the hope of a better Spain. But the association with the lynx as a national animal is only one factor in the revival of its fortunes. Time and again in my chats with Spanish rewilders, the name of one man crops up. They simply refer to him as Felix. Born in 1928, Felix Rodríguez de la Fuente was a cross between Aldo Leopold and David Attenborough.
Cae la tarde y el último lince de una de nuestras serranías vuelve a cambiar de sitio para tentar mejor suerte.
His nature documentary series Man and the Earth, with its funky Mission Impossible style theme tune, enjoyed huge audiences in the 1970s. Maria Jesus Palacios.
Us kids would be playing on the street and adults would call down, "It's Felix on TV," and we'd all scramble inside to watch Man and the Earth.
Será el último de sus lances.
And the man's voice was magnetic, a voice that passed through you.
In the early 70s, Spain was still under military dictatorship. Its record on animal rights was as poor as its record on human rights. Yet, when Felix died with his film crew in an air crash in Alaska in 1980, he'd become one of the most famous people in Spain. His funeral sparked nationwide grief. As a young man, Felix had hunted wolves. Later, he realized, much like Aldo Leopold did, that the wolf was not an enemy, but part of the great system of life. His raw emotion infusing his documentary on the wolf is credited with changing Spanish people's attitudes to that old foe. And his concern for the dwindling numbers of another carnivore paved the way, 20 years after his death, for the great campaign to save the Iberian lynx.
Those of us who were children then are the adults of now. Those of us making the decisions about nature conservation were educated in the values that Felix gave us. He taught us the importance of the Iberian lynx. And later we acted on it. It's one of his greatest legacies.
national energy emergency. We will drill, baby, drill.
But nothing stays the same. Across many countries in the world now, a cynical new politics is retreating from nature and climate goals. The two previous episodes on wolves and bears focused on the grim culture wars being fought over the return of these animals to European landscapes. This final episode on the Iberian Lynx in Spain was meant to be the uplifting ending. It turns out to be a bit more complicated than that. The same political dynamics that are putting bears and wolves at risk could also affect the Iberian lynx. The political changes sweeping Europe could reverse the advances made in Spanish rewilding. It's a few months after visiting lynx country in the south of Spain, and now I'm in the far north in Catalonia. It's mid-May. House martins and swifts are screaming around the church towers. I'm in a town called Tremp, about 60 miles south of the Pyrenees. The man I'm meeting is Jordi Palau, a director of Rewilding Spain, part of the Rewilding Europe family.
¿Cómo va? Muy bien, muy bien.
The rewilding project Jordi is showing me today consists of several hundred hectares along the banks of the Noguera Payas River. On arrival there's this surge in birdsong. You can hear newly arrived nightingales. The poplars and willows are gaining ground. Heavy spring rain has created pools among the trees, perfect conditions for a frog chorus.
I think we can hear, is that the oriole we can hear?
Yes,
What's the
golden oriole. And this is Bonelli's warbler.
Will the lynx ever come into Catalonia?
Yes, I think that they will come.
On their own?
On their own, but they need time.
Right.
If we don't reintroduce them actively, this will be a slow process.
The site seethes with possibilities. But in the few months since I went looking for lynx with Samuel down in the south, the mood among rewilders has become grimmer. The pressure on European Union states to lower hard-won nature protection has only gathered pace. A few years ago, Jordi says, there was a consensus in Europe that nature restoration was good.
And now they are starting to say, well, maybe this is not good or not necessary. No? And I think that a clear example of this is the primary sector, agriculture and all this, that they have very, very important problems. I think that nature is not one of them. All this is generating like a new scenario in which nature conservation is starting to be seen as something that maybe is not as clearly good for everybody as all we usually thought.
And there are connections being made with elites as well, aren't there?
Yes, because many people say all these ecological recovery, etc. Goals come from the European Union.
Jordi points out that the rise of the radical right is only one factor in Europe's retreat from nature goals. But a major shift is clearly underway, and signs of hostility in Spain to the Iberian lynx is a new and worrying trend.
Yes, as the species is growing in numbers and expanding in geographical range and becoming less and less endangered, I think that the risk of a different perception will increase.
Yes.
This is starting to happen because, for example, there has been 2 new attempts to establish new places of reintroduction of Iberian lynx in the last year, more or less. Not in the typical central southern Spain, but in northern Spain.
Yes.
And of those 4 proposals, 3 have failed because of social pressure with a species as the Iberian lynx that is so easy. So this is changing.
Es la mitad de un esqueleto de un lynx ibérico en muy buen estado de conservación.
In May 2024, at a site in southeastern Spain, archaeologists recovered the oldest and most complete skeleton of an Iberian lynx ever found. It's over 1 million years old. So, long before the domestication of animals and crops, long before the last Neanderthals died out in the caves of Gibraltar, and long before Homo sapiens arrived in Europe, the Iberian lynx, looking pretty much like it looks now, was here, in this land. It's a horrifying thought that this long chain of life was almost ruptured at the turn of the 21st century, and despite the advances made in the last 25 years, the Iberian lynx could yet succumb. It will need to grow its numbers and expand its ranges significantly if it's to survive. And yet, the Iberian lynx never fails to surprise. We heard earlier that lynx would eventually come to the far north of Spain, but it would take a while. Well, it turns out they're here already.
Evidence of the lynx.
And way farther north than anyone had expected.
Natural expansion.
This is the voice of Pau Vázquez, an expert on wolves in the Pyrenean mountains in the far north of Spain. Pau works for ADLO, a conservation association on the Spain side of the Pyrenean chain.
ADLO is an NGO dedicated to protection of the wolf and the brown bear.
Like many nature organisations, ADLO collects its data on wildlife from camera traps left in remote sites.
The camera was 7 kilometers from the French border. I manage the cameras in this area. We were following the trail of wolf. I had very little hope for that particular camera because the association has a very limited budget. It was an absolute surprise to detect an Iberian lynx on our camera. Honestly, I couldn't believe it. It was an enormous surprise, especially because the lynx showed up again on a second camera. Incredible.
The picture of Pau's lynx was shared with experts, and they recognised him. Born in southern Portugal in 2021, he'd been given a name by scientists, Secreto.
Sí, perché Secreto con el van de Xana a Sevilla tenía labor de un año.
Setting out from Seville, in southern Spain in 2022, Secreto had negotiated his way past highways, railways, rivers and urban areas, arriving here 3 years later, 650 miles to the north. Now, as we've heard, attitudes in northern Spain are more hostile to lynx than in the south. Farmers in the north are still poisoning rabbits. Many northern Spanish farmers are opposed to lynx reintroduction. Pau wonders if Secreto, realizing that the agricultural plain was too dangerous, decided to push even farther north.
500 meters above his usual comfort zone.
There's a problem, though, because rabbits are scarce in these mountains, and the nights are much colder than in southern Spain. Yet Pau believes Secreto might well be adapting. Maybe instead of rabbits, he's eating mountain hares, of which there are plenty. Rising global temperatures might take enough of the edge off the cold for Iberian lynx to live and thrive in these alpine valleys. For Pau, it's an exciting opportunity to witness an animal once on the edge of extinction, perhaps about to adapt to a new habitat and new climate. Nothing, though, can compete with the initial excitement of seeing the blurred but unmistakable form of an Iberian lynx exploring mountains hundreds of miles from where he had been born.
I never imagined the big three on the same camera. The lynx, the wolf and the bear. It was absolutely incredible. The joy after so many disappointments was immense.
We hope you enjoyed this special series on Europe's wolf, bear, and lynx, and we'd love to hear what you think. Please comment on your favorite episode at rewilding.org/pod on episodes 158, 159, or 160. And while you're there, please consider supporting the Rewilding Earth podcast. We do what we do because of awesome listeners like you. And after that, don't forget to share today's episode with friends. Thanks for listening.